Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're really getting into it with Marcus Aurelius and his meditations. When I first read this, it felt so personal, almost like reading someone's diary, someone reflecting on life and how to really live it well.
Yeah, I get that. It's funny because it wasn't actually meant to be published. It was more like Aurelius talking to himself, working through, grappling with these big ideas of Stoic philosophy. But, the wisdom in there, it feels so timeless, It still resonates today.
Yeah, it really does. And for this deep dive, we're going to focus on one of the big ideas from Meditations. It's this idea of virtue being like the only true good.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think Aurelius really meant by that? Why was it so important to him?
Well, you can't really understand what Aurelius meant by virtue without thinking about the Stoic framework as a whole. The Stoics really believed that living in harmony with nature, that was the way to live a truly fulfilling life. And to them, that meant aligning yourself with reason and with virtue.
So it's more than just being a good person in a general sense.
Exactly, yeah. For Aurelius, virtue, it wasn't just a bunch of rules or anything. It was more like an internal state of being. He saw it as the ultimate goal, the source of true happiness.
I see. And he's pretty strong about this. There's this one part where he's directly talking to the reader, and he's basically challenging them. He's saying, if thou shalt find anything in this mortal life better than righteousness, than truth, temperance, fortitude, apply thyself unto it with thy whole heart. But if nothing thou shalt find worthy to be preferred to that spirit which is within thee, then give not way to any other thing. Make choice of that which is best, and stick unto it. Now that, they say, is best, which is most profitable. It's almost like he's daring you, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And in that passage, he's laying out his values. It's like a hierarchy. Virtue at the top, and for him that means justice, wisdom, courage, self-control. And then everything else, all the stuff people usually chase after, wealth, status, even pleasure, those are all temporary, In the end, they don't really matter.
Makes you think, what would our lives look like if we really took that to heart, if that was our main focus?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think for Aurelius, the answer's pretty clear. Embrace virtue, and you find inner peace. You find a life that's in line with your true nature.
But how do you even start to understand that, this whole living according to nature thing? What does that actually look like, practically speaking?
Well, for Aurelius, it all came down to reason. It meant using our ability to reason to make choices that are good, choices that are right. It's about becoming the best version of yourself and not letting your emotions or all the crazy stuff happening around you, not letting that control you.
So it's about taking control, becoming the master of your own mind.
Yes, exactly. And this is where all that self-reflection that Aurelius talks about comes in. He believed in constantly examining your thoughts, your motives, trying to become aware of all the patterns and things that are holding you back from actually living a virtuous life.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But isn't there a risk of becoming too focused on yourself?
Yeah.
You're so busy working on your own virtue. What about your responsibilities to other people, to the world around you?
Oh, that's a good point. And I think Aurelius actually addresses that really well. He knew that we're not these isolated beings, We're all part of something bigger. There's actually this really powerful metaphor he uses in Meditations where he compares our lives to leaves, always changing, blown around by fate.
Oh, yeah. He says, of these leaves then thy children are, and they also that applaud thee so gravely, or that applaud thy speeches, with that their usual acclamation, so wisely spoken I, and speak well of thee, as on the other side, they that stick not to curse thee, they that privately and secretly dispraise and deride thee, they also are but leaves. And they also that shall follow, in whose memories the names of men famous after death is preserved, they are but leaves neither. For even so is it of all these worldly things. Their spring comes, and they are put forth, then blows the wind, and they go down. And then in lieu of them grow others out of the wood, or common matter of all things, like unto them. But to endure but for a while is common unto all. Why then shouldest thou so earnestly either seek after these things, or fly from them, as though they should endure forever? It's such a strong image, It really makes you think about how temporary everything is, even us.
Yeah, it's powerful. And for Aurelius, this awareness of how temporary everything is, it wasn't supposed to be depressing or anything. He saw it as a call to action. Hey, focus on what really matters. Focus on virtue.
So even though our lives are fleeting, like these leaves, our actions, they can still have a lasting impact.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real meaning of virtue is for Aurelius. It's not just about like personal gain or anything. It's about making the whole world better, contributing to the well-being of everyone. Even our small acts of virtue, they can ripple out and create a more just, a more harmonious world.
That's really beautiful. But let's be real. It's easy to talk about virtue, like in theory, but how do we actually live it? Especially when you're dealing with challenges and difficult people all the time.
Well, that's where self-control comes in. It's super important for Aurelius. He knew we all have these strong emotions and impulses that can really mess us up. But he also believed that we can use reason. Like we have the ability to choose how we respond to those challenges,
So it's not about like pretending you don't have emotions. It's more about using reason to guide them.
Yeah, exactly. He wants us to really look at our thoughts and impressions, question those knee-jerk reactions we all have. He even uses this analogy of wires and nerves in Meditations. He says, "Suffer not that excellent part to be brought in subjection and to become slavish. Suffer it not to be drawn up and down with unreasonable and unsociable lusts and motions, as it were, with wires and nerves. Suffer it not any more either to repine at anything now present, or to fear and fly anything to come, which the destiny hath appointed thee." Like, don't be a puppet, Don't let your emotions be the ones pulling the strings.
I like that. It's a good reminder that we do have a choice. We can just react, or we can step back and respond in a way that's true to ourselves.
And that's what Aurelius sees as real strength. Being able to choose, to respond with virtue, even when things are tough. He thought that when you work on virtues, justice, wisdom, courage, self-control, it's like building up this inner armor. It protects you from all the crazy stuff life throws at you.
Some people might say that this focus on self-control and reason, it sounds kind of cold, doesn't take away from like the richness of human experience. What about feelings and all that?
Yeah, I can see that, but I don't think Aurelius was saying to like get rid of your emotions completely. It was more about realizing that sometimes they can get in the way of making good decisions. So you need reason to step in and be the guide,
So it's about like a balance.
Yeah.
Reason and emotion working together.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's about realizing that we're complicated creatures, right? We can think and we can feel, and living a good life, it means honoring both sides of that.
It makes me think about this God within idea that Aurelius talks about. How does that fit into all this? The virtue, the living in accordance with nature, all that.
It's an interesting part of his philosophy for sure. He doesn't really go into detail about like what this inner divinity actually is, but I think it points to this Stoic idea of a universal logos, like a divine reason that's in everything.
So it's like there's a piece of the divine in all of us, and it's guiding us towards reason and virtue.
Could be. And I think it connects back to the whole living in harmony with nature thing. If there's this divine reason running the universe, then aligning ourselves with it through virtue and reason, that's the most natural way to live. It's the most fulfilling.
Like a cosmic dance or something. We're trying to get in sync with this universal rhythm.
I like that. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it really highlights how connected everything is, which was a big deal for Aurelius.
And speaking of connection, one thing that really stands out to me in Meditations is how much he talks about social responsibility. Even as an emperor, he didn't think virtue was just this solo thing,
Oh, totally. He understood that we're all part of this bigger society, and our actions, they affect other people. He believed that living a virtuous life, it wasn't just about you, it was about making things better for everyone.
So virtue has this ripple effect, like it spreads outwards.
Exactly. When we're kind, when we're brave, it can inspire other people to do the same. It can make society better, more harmonious.
It's a cool idea, but honestly, it feels like we're constantly getting messages that are the opposite of that. Everywhere you look, it's all about success and money and status. It's tough to resist that.
It is, yeah. And that's one of the reasons why Aurelius' writing is still so relevant. It's like a different way of looking at things, a different way of being in the world.
So how do we bridge that gap between these high ideals of virtue and just everyday life? How do we actually live this stuff?
That's the million-dollar question. But I think Aurelius gives us some clues. He really stresses mindfulness, paying attention to what we're thinking, what we're doing, what's motivating us throughout the day.
So just being present, aware of the choices we're making all the time?
Right. And reminding yourself about your commitment to virtue. to living in harmony with nature. He even says we should think of each day as a chance to practice virtue, to make choices that are in line with our values, even if they're small.
That makes it feel a little less overwhelming. Like it's not about being perfect. It's about trying to live a better life a little bit at a time.
You got it. It's a process. It's a journey. You're always growing, always trying to improve.
But what about those times when you mess up? We all do, right? We're human. We make mistakes. We fall short. What does Aurelius say about those times when you don't quite live up to your own ideals?
Well, that's where self-compassion comes in. He knew that we're not perfect, that we're going to screw up sometimes. The important thing is to not be too hard on yourself.
So acknowledge it, but don't let it, define you.
Exactly. He actually says to see mistakes as opportunities to learn, to grow.
It's a much better way to look at it instead of just beating yourself up. We're all works in progress, right?
Right, and it's about finding that courage to get back up and keep trying, keep striving for that virtuous life.
I'm curious, what about dealing with difficult people? I mean, he was an emperor. He must have had to deal with a lot of that. Did he have any advice on handling those tricky relationships?
He did. And it all comes from that Stoic understanding of human nature. He believed that everyone, even the jerks, they're acting from their own idea of what's good, even if it doesn't seem like it.
So you try to understand why they're doing what they're doing, even if it hurts.
Yeah, doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but you can at least try to see where they're coming from. Everyone's got their own struggles. They're all on their own journey,
That's hard to do, especially when someone's being unfair to you.
It is, and Aurelius knew that. But he thought that by responding to difficult people with virtue, with patience, understanding, maybe even forgiveness, you can break that cycle of negativity. And you're contributing to a more harmonious world.
I like that. Even when it's hard, we have the choice of how we respond. We can get angry and resentful, or we can choose to be virtuous.
And that's Aurelius's whole point, isn't it? Virtue is a choice. It's something you practice every day. And even little acts of virtue can have a huge impact on your life, on the world around you.
It's really inspiring. But I gotta admit, it's also kind of intimidating. It's a lot to live up to.
Yeah, I get it. But don't forget, Aurelius wasn't expecting us to become these, perfect Stoic philosophers overnight. It's a process. You keep growing,
So where do you even start?
Self-reflection. That's key. Aurelius talked about how important it is to really look at your thoughts, your motivations, all the stuff that's holding you back from living a virtuous life.
Like taking inventory of what's going on inside and seeing where you need to work on things.
Right, and be patient with yourself. It takes time to cultivate virtue. It's a lifelong thing.
Well, that's some great food for thought. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into meditations. It's been really insightful.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed this exploration of Aurelius's philosophy as much as we did.
Meditations,
沉思录
deep dive,
深入探讨
Stoic philosophy,
斯多葛哲学
timeless,
永恒的
virtue,
美德
Stoic framework,
斯多葛主义框架
harmony with nature,
与自然和谐
reason,
理性
righteousness,
正义公正
temperance,
节制
fortitude,
坚韧坚毅
hierarchy,
等级制度
inner peace,
内心的平静
mindfulness,
正念专注
self-compassion,
自我同情自我宽恕
knee-jerk reactions,
本能反应
repine,
抱怨